Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you again after my mission. Thank you for being here. Fidèle au poste. Okay, let's start immediately. I will give straight away the floor to Jennifer, as I missed last week, but I've seen you've been very active. So let's hear from Jennifer what's going on. Thank you.
So good morning. Just a brief update on the work of the Syrian Constitutional Committee. On Monday, the first meeting of the small body of 45 members of the Constitutional Committee convened at the Palais. The meetings, being led by the two co-chairs with the facilitation of the Special Envoy for Syria, will continue this week. The first working session of the small body was positive. The meeting focused on the processes and agenda of the small body, which will work on the draft constitution that will be presented to the 150 members to approve. As Mr. Pedersen noted on Friday, the Constitutional Committee members in the small body were agreed on by the large body of 150 members. Also on Friday, the Office of the Special Envoy released the Code of Conduct and initial procedural practices that were adopted by consensus in the committee. Separately, the Humanitarian Task Force will meet this Thursday at 10:30 and will keep you abreast of any information from that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I guess there are questions. Nick?
Hi, Jennifer. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Is it fair to say then that the discussions at this point are still focused on process rather than actual substantive issues of the Constitution? And secondly, when you say that the small group meetings were facilitated by Mr. Pedersen, was he in the room constantly for that process?
Mr. Pedersen has been available as the co-chair's desire, so this is again Syrian-led and Syrian-owned. What I can note is, it was the first meeting yesterday of the small body, so it is, as I mentioned previously, just now.
I don't see other hands, surprisingly. Okay, thank you very much, Jennifer. We free you, and bon courage. Andrea is not yet here, so let's ask Jens and Marixi to come on the podium. Who's Jens? Yeah. You have an update on Cameroon, please.
Good morning, everybody. I will be sending out a press release shortly updating on education in Cameroon, which will include quotes from our executive director, but for now, here are the salient points. 3 years of violence and instability in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon have left more than 855,000 children out of school. 2 months since the beginning of the new school year, around 90% of public primary schools, that's more than 4,100 schools, and 77% of public secondary schools, and that's 745, remain closed or non-operational. The northwest and southwest regions used to be the places where education was best in the country, but there has been a continuing no-school policy instated by non-state armed groups. In the past 3 years, at least 70 schools have been destroyed and pupils and teachers have been kidnapped. A very real fear of violence also keeps parents from sending their children to school and teachers and staff from reporting to work. In some areas where schools have been closed, community-run learning activities have been initiated so that children do not miss out further on their education. UNICEF is procuring school books and other learning material for 37,000 school-aged children, and we are training teachers, including on social cohesion and accelerated learning. We will also be disseminating literacy and numeracy lessons by radio for children who are forced to stay at home so that they can catch up with learning. UNICEF calls on all communities, armed groups, and government authorities to protect education in all its forms, to respect teachers and other education personnel, and to enable children to learn in a safe and protective environment. Without urgent action and without a commitment from all parties to the conflict to protect education in all its forms, the future of these children is at risk. I'd also like to add some points on context that are not in the press release that I will be distributing. What began as a political crisis in the northwest and southwest regions is now a quickly deteriorating humanitarian emergency. Around 1.9 million people, about half of whom are children, are estimated to be in need, which is an increase of 80% compared to 2018 and an almost 15-fold increase since 2017. Humanitarian conditions are projected to deteriorate further in 2020 in the absence of a political solution. Security poses a major constraint. UNICEF has recorded 529 security incidents in both regions since the beginning of the year. Since August, a growing number of NGOs have been affected by incidents, including hostage-taking and extortion, and 5 out of 7 attacks against aid workers took place between September and October. The Northwest region is especially affected. In the Southwest region, access has improved slightly, and we have been able to conduct more missions during the second quarter of the year compared to the first, and to reach places that haven't been accessible for a year or more. At this point, approximately 65% of both regions are inaccessible due to insecurity, but also to a lesser degree because of extremely poor road conditions. Finally, funding is another huge constraint. UNICEF is just 45% funded against our 2019 requirement of $20 million for the response in the Northwest and Southwest regions. Thank you.
Thank you, Marixie. Jens?
Yeah, thank you, and good morning, everyone. Just a couple of points I wanted to add on security and on the funding. Indeed, attacks on civilians and humanitarian supplies and personnel are on the rise. A couple of examples. On the 2nd of September, gunmen shot at an ambulance of the Archdiocese of Bamenda in Akum, that's in the northwest region. And there was another incident on the 28th of September when non-state armed groups burned a truck carrying WFP aid supplies in Bambili in the same area. We also had reports in September of 3 female students from the Catholic school at Ngongham that were reportedly kidnapped by suspected non-state armed group members while they were heading to school. We heard from UNICEF that funding for them is an issue. It is an issue across the humanitarian response in Cameroon. We have an appeal out here in 2019 for 299 million. It's only 41% funded generally. However, education is particularly underfunded at 11% only of the nearly 16 million that is included in our appeal for education. So 11% for education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? John?
Yes, good morning, Jens. The attacks by non-armed groups, do we have any idea which armed groups are these? Is it Boko Haram? Is it Islamic State? Which groups are doing the attacks?
I do not have indication of which armed groups they are. They are identified as non-state armed groups, and I think I will stay with that. I simply don't have information on the identity of these. What matters is, of course, that when armed groups like these kidnap students on the way to school, that's absolutely horrific and must be condemned.
Yeah. Lisa?
Yeah, I'm a little out of my depth because I came in late, but you talk about kidnappings. Do you have a total figure of how many children have been kidnapped, and what happens to them? Are they held for ransom, or they simply disappear? Do you have any way to monitor the situation?
I do not have any overall number of that or any more detail than I have given you on these kidnappings. I don't know, Marixie may have a bit more.
I don't have numbers either, but I do remember one incident, and I can't remember exactly when a number of children were kidnapped and then subsequently released. But I can try to find out more from you from the country office.
Okay. Any other question? No? Thank you very much to the colleagues. Monica? Okay, for those who don't know Monica, she is the not so new anymore, huh? Head of communication of ITU. Monica, your family name is Ken, if I pronounce it well. So you're here to tell us about the new publication of the ITU.
Yes, thank you very much, Alessandra. Good morning, everyone. Today we launch New Facts and Figures 2019. That's it's part of a new series that's coming out about facts and figures across the year. So rather than having one measuring the Information Society report that you may be familiar with once a year, we will keep a constant stream of data on various indicators measuring telecommunications in the world. You will find a press release in French and in English, embargoed 12 o'clock today at the entrance, as well as a printout of the publication. And after the press briefing, we also have a print copy. I just didn't put it there because it doesn't have the embargo date. We have Susan Shelcher, if anyone would like to have some questions answered after the briefing or later on. So the objective of the facts and figures is really to help decision makers in policy and regulation to make decisions about improving access for all, universal access to internet and usage. Digital technologies, as we know, are improving lives everywhere, in health, in finance, in agriculture, and we want everyone to have access to the digital economy and human progress through ICTs. I'll give you a few statistics and messages, key messages. So one, internet access is not necessarily synonymous with internet usage. And the data show that. So 96% of the world population have access to a mobile signal, 1G, 2G, 3G, and beyond. But only 53.6% of the world population actually use the internet. And that is 4.1 billion people that actually use, which leaves us with 3.6 billion people that are cut off the digital revolution. And the second key message is that the world faces a widening digital gender gap. So over half of the global population of women, 52%, is still not using the internet, and that compares to 42% of all men. The progress for having access and using the internet is much bigger for men than for women over the past 2 years. And third, the third message, internet or the growth rates for internet access and usage is not as high as a decade ago. The progress has slowed down in many parts of the world, particularly in developed countries. So if we want to connect all the people, we have to lower the cost of broadband. We have to introduce innovative policies for regulators to finance the rollout of infrastructure to people that are not connected in remote areas, in mountainous areas, etc. We have to make the services more affordable. We have to offer relevant content in local languages so people use the internet more and the information and education it offers. And we have to build digital skills for women and for men and increase their digital literacy. So thank you all for raising awareness of these new data to help decision makers make better informed decisions.
Thank you, Monica. Any questions for ITU? Yeah, I'll start with Agnès. AFP.
Okay.
Monica doesn't know you also, maybe. I told her.
Yes,
Go
okay.
ahead,
So Agnès Pedrero, Agence France Presse. So as you presented most of the findings of the report, should we assume that it's not anymore under embargo? And if you could then explain us why men, maybe some people would say that we know why, but could you say why men have more access than women to internet and to mobiles?
Okay, so the first question was about the embargo. The embargo, so it's 12 o'clock. We sent out the press release embargoed last night in English. So 12 o'clock today, you can use the data and publish.
Yes, but there were cameras and...
No, because we don't go live, as you know.
Yes, it's after the press briefing that it goes live. We checked that beforehand.
That's what we normally do to give you a comparative edge, Anya. Yeah?
And for
but if you want to issue the story, yeah, you have to wait until 12. That's right.
12 o'clock. Yes. Yeah.
On the second question, Susan, you want to answer?
Yeah.
Susan Telcher.
And she's the head of, acting head of statistics.
Thank you very much for the question. So on the internet user gender gap, what we have found is especially the gender gap has increased in the developing world. So this is also why globally the gender gap has increased. It's due to a growing number of men using the internet in the developing world, and the same growth has not happened for women. And there's a number of explanations to that, especially in the low-income countries. A lot of women live in rural areas, have less access to education, are less literate, and also have a higher share among the poor population. And all of these are actually barriers to internet usage. So if you live in the city, if you have access to better education, you have access to jobs, so you also have a higher income, you can actually buy the service. And the shares of women not having these possibilities is much higher in less developed countries, and especially in the least developed countries. And there we have found the gender gap actually the highest and also growing over the past few years. So all of these are explanations in terms of living in rural areas, having less access to education, having higher rates among the illiterate population, and also having a higher share in terms of population with very low incomes. Thanks.
Jamil first. Yeah, you have a follow-up, Agnès? Okay.
Yes. So then if you say that living in rural area means that you have less access to these mobiles and then to internet, but at the same moment, I thought that there was a urbanization of these countries. So the gap shouldn't be growing, it should be narrowing. So how do you explain these two trends, contradictory trends?
Yes, definitely. There is a growing urbanization, we all know that. But often the share of women who stay in the rural areas is much higher than those of men. Women still have a higher share in terms of being active in the agricultural sector. So migration is ongoing to the urban areas, but less among women than among men. So that's also one of the explanations why you have more women living in rural areas. And even if there's, the connection is not as has good quality and not as high speed in rural areas for a number of reasons that are related to infrastructure rollout. So you also don't have the possibility of having perhaps free access to Wi-Fi through public institutions and so on and so forth. So all of these are explanations for why we find this.
Jamil.
Yeah, Jamil Shade from Brazil, here. My question is about the fact that you mentioned that the gender is increasing. So what was the percentage or whatever, let's say 5 or 10 years ago, for us to know that there's an increase? Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So it's actually in this publication that you will see shortly. So we have the hang on. I can give you the numbers. I don't have my glasses, but yeah, it's comparing 2013. Yeah.
Oh, then it's already gone. There is a printout in English of the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a popular thing. So
yeah, we have some more copies.
We have some more.
We have some more copies. So we are comparing 2013 and 2019 figures, and you can find all these figures in this publication. But just to give you an example, in the least developed countries, so in 2013 the gender gap was 26%. I don't have my 29%, and now in 2019 it's 42.8, right? 42.8%.
Yes, Christian. Yeah.
But what is 29% and what is 42%? Sorry.
The way this is measured is that you use the internet user penetration for men and women, and then you look at the difference and you divide it by the male internet user population. That's how the gap is calculated. It's explained also in the document.
Yeah, Christiane, German press agency. I had the same question, and I don't understand the answer. I don't have that paperwork in front of me, so it's very difficult for us to follow.
I can explain to you later when we can look at it together, and then...
But the question is probably interesting for many people.
If it's more than one journalist that doesn't understand.
Okay. So we are looking at the difference between the internet user penetration rate for men and women, and then this is divided by the internet user penetration rate of men. So this is how the gap is calculated. It's a statistical calculation. That's how you also calculate, for example, wage gaps and other gaps.
Maybe you could just give us the rates for men and women in 2013 and 2019.
The rate, we also have that, yes. We also have the rates, depending for which group of countries you would like to have it. For the least developed countries, we have internet penetration rate for men, 24.4, and for women, 13.9. Yeah. For the least developed countries. We also have the numbers published for developing countries as a group, and also for developed countries and for the world. All of the numbers are here. Yeah.
We'll get those figures somehow.
Maybe, Monica, I don't know if you can send them electronically, maybe if you don't have enough copy here.
We have some more here, which we give you right after the press briefing.
Thank you. Jérémy Lange pour Radio France et RFI. I just wanted to have if you could be a bit more specific about which countries are doing good and which one are not.
This is for the gender gap?
No, I mean generally, not the gender gap.
So in this publication, we don't publish country-level data. It's only the estimates that we do for 2019, because this is the latest data. So this is estimates that ITU produces for the current year. We publish only at the aggregate level. So for the world, for developing countries, for LDCs, and by regions, but not at the country level. So for country level data, we publish the data that we collect, but then it would be referring to the previous year. So the estimates are at the aggregate level.
Lisa.
Good morning, Lisa Schlein, Voice of America. I'd like to understand, why is this gender gap widening, and what are the implications, the consequences of this? And you are comparing, you gave us statistics for 2013, so is the comparison between 2013 and present day, is that what the study is dealing with?
Yeah, so we are comparing 2013 with 19 in this publication, because 2013 was the first year where we actually did the calculation. But we also have published in the past for other years in between. But in this one, we just compare those two countries, because these are this is the earliest 2013 where we had. So the explanation, I already mentioned some of the reasons before, is also that the growth rates then in a number of developing countries for male internet users was higher than for women, right? For female internet users, and this is how the gender gap has actually occurred. And this, for a few of those reasons that I mentioned before, that men have more access to education, to literacy, to income that allows them to actually buy for the service, that there's a higher proportion of men or less men in the rural areas where we have less internet access than in urban areas, so they have access to the to internet because they may be at the job or in other public areas, more access than women, and that's also why they can use it. So there's a number of reasons that are responsible for that. And we have found this mostly in the poorer countries. And this is also because over the past years we have seen a very steady growth of internet usage across countries. And now we have a certain population that is connected, and now the focus is on how can we get people with low income, those at the bottom of the pyramid especially, how can we get them connected? And that's where more of the challenges lie. So now we have to really look what are the barriers. And in fact, a huge barrier that we have also found is related to awareness and education and skills, because often when you ask people, why are you not using the internet, they say, oh, I don't know what it's about, what can I do with it? So they have all these explanations that are pointing to the fact that they are not aware, they have not been exposed to it, they are not literate, and this is really where a lot of the policies have to focus on in the future. And women are more affected by this than men.
You also, if you would please, what are the consequences of women not having the kind of access that men have to the internet? What does this mean for their lives, for society?
This has, of course, major consequences because they are basically excluded from an increasingly digital world. So they don't have access to any of the information that is available on the internet. They don't have access to the many applications that are available now through smartphones, which can help them in their daily lives, in communication, in doing their daily activities, in having access to education, to health, to government services. So it has major implications because they basically remain excluded from an increasingly digital world, and this digitalization is going on not only here but also in the developing countries.
Imogen.
Yeah, it's kind of a similar question, but it strikes me that the situation is going to become a bit like a vicious circle, because the kind of current long-term discrimination or lack of access to, say, education, work, skills, lack of access to digital technology and to the internet is going to mean lack of skill and lack of education.
Yeah, exactly, and this is why the focus has to be across the different sectors, and we in IT also work very closely with other UN agencies, actually, like UNESCO and others who actually work on the different sectors, and also in the countries it's increasingly recognized that all the different government sectors have to work together, because it's not only about having access to infrastructure. It's about connecting school, it's about connecting hospital, it's about connecting communities, it's about rolling out digital skills programs outside the urban areas into the community centers, into the rural areas, and working with all the different partners that are involved outside the actual telecommunication sector as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry.
Final.
Yeah, no, I didn't get your last name. This is a really easy
Okay.
question.
No, sorry, we didn't make the nameplate because we didn't know Susan was coming. Susan Telcher, T-E-L-T-S-C-H-E-R. I remember well. T-E-L-T-E-S-C-H-E-R. Next time you tell us, we prepare a nameplate. Okay, thank you very much. Gabriela Porellos?
Just, are they going to send us the report on digital by mail? Yeah?
Yes, you receive a digital toolkit, kit. Yeah, press kit. Okay? Thank you very much. Okay. Rosalind has been very patient. Go ahead. And Andrei is here, so after Rosalind, we will hear about the floods in Somalia and South Sudan. Go ahead.
Good morning. On a kind of slightly related topic, the ILO today is launching a new statistics portal on labour data, which will enable you to access data on a wide range of labour-related topics by country, by subject, in English, French and Spanish. So, for example, if you're doing a story on unemployment rates, on child labour, on forced labour, you will be able to access the data relating to the topic through this portal. And it includes data tables, concepts, methods, etc., and publications. And the page also links to blogs and insights by ILO statisticians and economists. We will send you a short press release today with all the relevant links to the portal. But what I wanted to ask you is whether you might be interested in an information session on how to use this portal, because I think it will be pretty useful for you and your story. So if you are interested, if you could just drop me an email, and then, depending on the level of interest, we'll set up a short information session.
Thank you.
On a second topic, on Friday, as part of our centenary celebrations, the ILO will be hosting a one-day event celebrating 100 years of maternity protection. And this event will bring together a number of experts on the topic, as well as policy makers, to discuss the issue, and also to draw, one of the aims is to draw political attention to the need to achieve universal maternity protection, and to raise awareness of the benefits of universal social protection. The event, it starts at 9 o'clock, it ends at 5:30. We will be sending you a media advisory about this, and it is open to the media. So again, any questions, just direct it to me.
Questions for Rosalind? I can't see any. Thank you very much. Andrei and Tariq. Who wants to start? Want to? Let's start with HCR.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. A quick update from Somalia. Our first airlift, which was a small fighter plane, Fokker 50, a two-engine plane, brought 6 metric tons of aid to Beledweyne in in central Somalia, to assist people displaced by the country's worst flooding in years. Monday's delivery was the first in a series of flights UNHCR is organizing in humanitarian supplies to more than 20,000 people who have been cut off by the floodwaters and can only be reached by air. We are scheduling up to 10 flights, 3 a day, to airlift a total of 60 metric tons to urgently needed humanitarian relief kits, including jerry cans, soaps, blankets, kitchen sets, and plastic sheeting. UNHCR will also deliver some 2,000 emergency shelter kits to the area. Additionally, 500 further emergency kits will be airlifted to Southwest State, where there are also been some serious flooding. The air operation largely depends on landing strips being available, as floodwaters have engulfed a vast area. Reports of our partners indicate that villages on the outskirts of Beledweyne, which is about 340 kilometers north of capital Mogadishu, have been submerged and hundreds of families are trapped in their homes. The impact of the floods has been devastating for local communities in Somalia, with more than 300,000 people displaced. The majority, some 230,000, have taken shelter in Beledweyne town and are in urgent need of humanitarian assistance. Somalia has shown progress in dealing with both armed conflict and drought, but remains fragile, with an internally displaced population of some 2.6 million people. Another 770,000 Somalis live as refugees in the neighboring countries, mostly Kenya and Ethiopia. The floods highlight Somalia's increasing vulnerability to the effects of climate change. In July this year, humanitarian agencies had launched a drought impact response plan following below average rains, resulting in severe drought conditions in the country. Given these latest developments, an immediate humanitarian emergency response is crucial. UNHCR and partners have mobilized $2.5 million for this response, with a gap of further $11 million required to meet the existing humanitarian needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tariq?
The Thank you, Alessandra. Good morning, everyone. We will have a note sent to you a little bit later today on floods in parts of Africa and Middle East. So I will start by adding something on Somalia, then I will expand on South Sudan. So when it comes to Somalia, many of flood-hit districts are already experiencing cholera. It is endemic area for cholera. People are facing limited access to health facilities, and many roads are now impassable. We also see an upsurge of malaria and diarrhea as the situation is becoming critical. In line with the government's relief plan in Somalia, WHO has helped deploy 20 emergency response teams, 10 rapid response teams, and distributed 483 medical supply packages that include cholera modules and trauma supplies. In addition, a rapid needs assessment has been conducted to prepare response activities, and also fogging for vector control is planned with the support from the Ministry of Health, and this fogging will contribute to reduce malaria and dengue cases. That's for Somalia, but our note that you will receive later speaks about WHO upping disease surveillance and actions, providing critical supplies to stricken populations in a number of countries. Well over 1 million people have been affected in the worst hit places: Benin, Cameroon, Central African Republic, Somalia, South Sudan, and Yemen. Flood-hit populations face dangers from waterborne diseases, disease through overcrowding in temporary shelters, and increased risk of illnesses or death as health services become unreachable. Working with governments, the UN and other partners, WHO works to reduce risks of outbreaks of diseases such as cholera, typhoid, and other infectious diseases. Particularly when it comes to South Sudan, South Sudan has experienced heavy flooding since July 2019, which has affected 32 counties, and you will have the list of them in the note that I will send later. Since the latest rains began, 42 nutrition centers have been forced to suspend their services. Most of these areas were already facing high humanitarian needs before the flooding started, with more than 60% of them classified as having extreme level of acute malnutrition, mostly impacting children and new mothers. Nearly 1 million people have been affected by heavy flooding, which has devastated large areas, displaced many communities, including IDPs, internally displaced people, refugees, and their host communities, in a country that has already been hit by years of civil war that caused mass displacement and wrecked the economy. Access to health services, nutrition services, basic services, and markets are among the needs that have been affected by the floods. The rains are likely to continue at least until the end of November and put more people at risk of infectious diseases. To help the government's emergency response, WHO is making a range of experts available. Medical supplies have been airlifted to hard-hit areas, and more deliveries are set for the coming days. Concretely, WHO has repurposed staff to respond and support the government. Supplies have been airlifted from our logistic hub in Ghana over the weekend. We also have developed an operation response plan at a cost of $3.6 million, participating in a flash appeal and exploring other funding mechanisms. We will support further assessment and situation analysis in cooperation with other partners.
And I take this opportunity to remind you that today, 5th of November, the international community comes together to commemorate World Tsunami Awareness Day. In 2019, we are promoting the Target D of the Sendai 7 campaigns, which focuses on reducing disasters damage to critical infrastructure and disruption of basic services. It has been estimated by the year 2030, about 50% of the world population will live in coastal areas exposed to flooding, storms, and tsunamis. Investing in resilient infrastructure, early warning systems, and education is critical to saving people and protecting their assets against this kind of risk in the future. So, questions, Lisa?
Yeah, first a general question on how many people in total are affected by the floods in Somalia. You, Andre, mentioned that you're sending supplies for 20,000 people, but I imagine that many more people are affected and in need of emergency care, and I'm wondering, how many there are and what is being done to help them. And Tarek, in terms of the diseases and cholera, do you have any figures on the numbers of people who already are affected by this? Are you concerned that this could turn into a full-blown epidemic of some kind?
So the estimate is that more than 300,000 people, Somalis, are being affected by these floods and displaced by the floods. This is an estimate, obviously, and the figures could easily be higher. There is an interagency response inside Somalia. UNHCR is delivering aid for 20,000 at this stage. Other agencies are also delivering. I believe WFP had a press release yesterday on this issue. So there is a concerted humanitarian effort on the way to address the needs.
Yes, obviously we are concerned, but not only about infectious diseases. When you have floods, well, obviously you have different types of floods. You can have a flash floods, you can have river floods, you can have coastal floods. There are a number of health issues to deal with. One of them is obviously it's injuries. People get injured. There's a risk of drowning. There is a risk of people being cut just walking through the water, stepping on nails or on glass. And then there is also issue of access to health services, because the health facilities become difficult to reach, and also people, as they leave their home, may well lose also their medicines that they are taking for their chronic diseases. So really there is a number of health issues when it comes to floods, as well as it comes to other natural disasters. Obviously the risk of infectious diseases is rising because usually there is a problem with access to clean water, and then waterborne diseases obviously present a major risk. There's also issue of vector-borne diseases, because there's lots of stagnant water, so vectors such as mosquitoes find their breeding sites. I don't have really any figures, but again, this is something that WHO is working with countries, trying to make countries prepared in advance for such events, because we know what are the major issues that I just outlined right now when it comes to that. As we get some numbers, I'll come back to you. Thanks.
Just a very quick follow-up. Are there any figures on deaths? I've heard figures about homeless people, displacement, and so forth, but very little on deaths. Would be fortunate if there are not many.
Really, the only information I have is because Yemen was also affected, and let me just come back to you on that. Let me just look for it, and I'll come back to you. We have there were issues. There were some casualties in Yemen, but I have to find that information.
Gabriela, was it a hand?
Yeah, I have a question, but on another topic, if
possible. Wait a second, please. Anybody else on the flooding? No? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. As you may know, yesterday the government of Mr. Trump, they announced to the UN USA official withdrawal from landmark 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. So what are your reactions? I don't see here WMO. I mean, this is a big scandal. What are the consequences of one of the main polluters pulling out of this agreement? I mean, it affects us all.
Are you asking me, right? Yeah. Okay. For the moment, the only thing I can say is note to correspond is in the note of correspondence that we've sent you this morning, where we acknowledge the letter of Secretary of State of the United States, Mr. Pompeo, who has indicated the wish of the United States to withdraw. That's, for the moment, we don't have any, we take note of the letter. And for the moment, that's what I have. Maybe we'll have more comments during the day. Yes, Emma.
Hi, good morning. Just to follow up for you, Alessandra, I was wondering if you could comment on the liquidity crisis within the UN. How bad is it? How deep in the red are they? I understand some payments have come through, but could you offer some context on how much has come through and how this compares to historical liquidity crises? And finally, these sort of notices up around Geneva and New York, are they sort of symbolic, you know, cutting the elevators, or is this actually saving you a lot of money? Any context appreciated. Thanks.
On this, the deputy spokesperson of the Secretary General put it in a way that I think it's very nice. He said we are not out of the woods yet. So we have had, after the Secretary General rang the bell, the alarm bell, we have had further contributions. The countries which have been paying in full are registered on the website. I can send you the link. The Committee on Contribution of the General Assembly register all the payment in full. It also has a very interesting table which I would invite you to look at when you speak about comparison with other years. All the situation of the contribution since 2003 are recorded. So you have a table where you can actually make a comparison from 2003 to today, month by month, how the payments have been given. So if we look, for example, at December, so I'm speaking about the end of the year, 2003, 127 countries had paid, and today, of course, we are not yet in December, but at the end of October, we had 134 countries who had paid in full. But we also have a few countries who have paid partially, so they are not recorded here as such. And as I said, we are not out of the woods completely, but we have had some contributions. We expect more contributions from member states in the next weeks. We have had discussions with most of the debtor, and the discussion has been positive, so hopefully the money will come in, and the issue of the lifts will be a bad souvenir. The other question you asked was about the measures here taken here in Geneva. The line that has guided us under the guidance of the Secretary General has been from the beginning not to touch what we call the post costs. Everything that relates to the posts, to the staff contributions, we've tried not to touch. And this has been done in Geneva, in New York, consistently. But this means that in a situation of very strong cash limitation, we had to limit everything else, including, as you have noticed, in the building, lifts, and so on and so forth. I've been to New York last week, and the situation is the same. You have escalators closed, you have lift or entry or exit door condemned. So this is a reality throughout the Secretariat. It's not a question of being symbolic or not symbolic. The issue is we have to find the money, we have to save the money where the money is without affecting the salary of the staff, which is our best resource. So it is lifts, it is travels, procurements, the fact that we now open, I don't know if you noticed, but the Palais opens one later at 7:30. We don't have any more meetings or activities after 6 o'clock. So this is consistent throughout the Secretariat, and it is allowing us to face this crisis without, as much as possible, at least to date, having a repercussion on the staff of the salary of the staff.
And just to follow up, if I may, what do you think this says, Alessandra? Do you think this is symptomatic of a sort of apathy about the UN amongst the member states, the fact that they're not paying on time?
It's not my job here to speculate, so I will leave the speculation to you. But if you look at the table that I have indicated to you, you will see that during the last, so I said 2003, 16 years, there has always been fluctuation in the number of countries that have paid in full at the end of the year. Jamila.
For you to take such decisions on the lift, etc., it's probably because you made some calculations. Can we know what was saved and how much was saved?
I am not sure we have calculations, especially for what concerns travels, procurement. These are easier to calculate. I understand my colleagues have also done calculations on heating and lighting of the Palais. I'm not sure I haven't seen these numbers, but I can ask if we can make available at least some of them.
Sorry, the heating was also cut or not?
Yeah, heating, lighting, everything which concerns electricity, all these factors have been counted in. That's why some of the lifts, for example, have been closed. The idea is not to suppress the lift. The issue is to diminish the energy costs of the Palais, so that includes also heating. I have to check, Jamila, I don't have the statistics, and I can ask my colleagues from the administration. Yes, Lisa.
Has the United States paid up, and if so, how much did it pay, and if not, how much hasn't it paid?
If they had paid in full, they would appear on our list, so that's not a full payment. Some payments, I understand, have been done, but I don't have the numbers. I can ask New York, but I don't have the numbers with me. Anybody else? Anybody for the colleagues who have been waiting here? Terry, you have something to add?
Yeah, just if I found the numbers. So the cyclonic storm Luban struck Yemen in October, killing 14 people and displacing over 800. In response, WHO propositioned supply and medical kits that are being able to provide support to population. And that's just one of this storm is an example that 2019 has become the most active North Indian cyclone season on record, with climate change steering up increasingly extreme weather worldwide.
Thank you very much. I have only a couple of announcements for you at the end of this press briefing. First of all, today we are holding the opening ceremony of Geneva Peace Week. You may remember from last editions, this is really a large, very large event, the largest probably event on peace that we organize annually in Geneva. As peace and security challenges multiply, this week creates the space for concrete action in a rapidly changing world. We have more than 100 expert activists and decision makers, which have organized over 70 events in town, including the Palais des Nations, during this week. The opening ceremony will be held today at 5 o'clock at the auditorium Ivan Pictet, the Graduate Institute. Our Director General will open the event. There will be also a roundtable, a nominating roundtable with a few interesting speakers. I would just mention Ella Gandhi, the granddaughter of the Mahatma Gandhi, and the Secretary General of IFRC. You're all invited kindly to join us for this event, and also for the event that the week will see organized in the Palais and in town. Press conference on Thursday, 7th of November in press room 1 at 1:30. OHCHR, the Human Rights Committee, will brief you on the 127th session of the committee. And then here, the new list of spokespersons has been published. Emma, we did it for you. Here it is. It has been sent to you and to everybody else. I hope you'll be using it extensively for your coverage. And that's all for me. Lisa.
What countries is the committee? What countries did the committee examine? The Human Rights Committee. I was absent, so I don't know.
The Human Rights Committee in this session reviewed the reports of Senegal, Belgium, Mexico, Czech Republic, Central African Republic, and Cabo Verde. Thank you very much. Sorry, Katrina has a quick announcement. Sorry. Just one moment. Moment of patience. Come.
Non, je veux juste vous rappeler qu'on a une conférence de presse à 14 heures en salle de presse 1 et qu'on a des nouvelles données sur les effets de la guerre commerciale USA-Chine. À tout à l'heure.
Merci beaucoup. Et pardon pour ça, mais j'avais pas.